Hi, I have an incredible book recommendation for you guys for 2021. So in November, I read this book, Breasts and Eggs by Miko Kawakami. And I love Japanese literature. I love reading books by new authors. I love familiarizing myself with completely new authors. And I love feminist works of art. And just, everything was set right for me to love this book. But one thing that I really wanted to know is why everyone was referring to this book as, oh, this is the new Murakami. It's very Murakami-esque. Sorry, I need to position me slightly because the sun is going down. Yeah, that's better. And it's very Murakami-esque and la la la. And I'm like, really? Interesting. Because when I read very few books by Japanese authors, I did find kind of, like Murakami was the first one I got into very intensely. And then when I read other authors, I always found like a little bit of Murakami in there, but that is Japanese literature as I've come to understand. It has this particular pace and particular kind of characters. There's always, I don't know how to say it. You'll see when you read more and more Japanese literature, there is a style that's very distinct and I love it. Having read the book now, I can say that I don't agree completely with the fact that it is very Murakami-esque, but I do think that she is an incredible author and you have to read this book in the new year. Breasts and Eggs, it was first released in Japan many years ago, I think, and it's very recently the two books that she released have been combined and released to the English audience under the name Breasts and Eggs. And I think it's very fitting to the theme of the book. It's very literal, if I can say so. As I've grown up, I've realized that there's a lot of things in this world about women that men just don't understand. They have never been taught. I don't know why, but they just don't know, don't understand, don't care for it because it's not something that they think is something that they should be worried about. But I completely disagree. The more knowledge men have of womanhood and motherhood and general things like that, the more of a support system, of a viable support system we women are going to have. If men just simply don't understand, we cannot let it be. The book follows three characters who are in three different phases of their life. So someone who's kind of in school, someone who's in their early 30s, someone who's in their like late 30s. So you get to see like a few different perspectives. You get to learn about womanhood, about motherhood, and I would highly encourage anyone and everyone watching this video to read it. The book starts off with Natsuko, who is a 30-year-old woman living in Tokyo, and she's an aspiring author. She's kind of been in part-time jobs. Her dream is to be a full-time author, and she's just, she's still struggling. She's from Osaka, and Natsuko's sister Makiko comes to visit her for a weekend with Makiko's sister Midoriko. Sorry, I'm just referring to the names of the characters because I have them written. Makiko is about 7-8 years older. I don't remember the ages, and Midoriko is in her early teens. So she is very much in that transition period from a child to kind of a girl. Is that right? Like she's getting into womanhood and she's hitting puberty, she's starting to get her periods, and there's just a lot happening everywhere. Now Midoriko doesn't really talk to her mom. She's been mute for about 6 months now, and she only does like handwritten notes, but she's normal in school. She interacts with most people normally, just doesn't speak to her mom like vocally. So Midoriko and Makiko, the mother, they come to visit Natsuko in Tokyo, and this is just them staying over for a weekend and what happens during the duration of the weekend. I'm not going to spoil the book because there is a lot of things that I want to kind of leave it for you to interpret and read. But what you learn very early on is what Makiko's profession is and why her daughter feels so uncomfortable with everything that is going on. And in this first book, Natsuko almost is like a kind of passive, like on the side, just kind of observing what's happening with her sister and her niece, trying to understand her niece, trying to see what's actually happening, trying to be helpful, but also feeling really helpless. But this book was so important in terms of these ridiculous beauty standards the world has for women. Like they talk about things like breast augmentation and just sexualization of women in workplace, and women wanting pinker nipples and wanting just more of a kind of like attention from just augmenting their body, and what their idea of perfect is, what they think should be pretty, and how age plays a role in a certain way, even how childbirth takes away from a woman in terms of appearance and how women feel about it. There is just so many, I don't even know how much, and so much was packed into this book that it's difficult to sit here and try and talk about it, because it's like, how can I unpack so much in so little time, but it was absolutely fantastic. At the end of the first part of the book, I especially really found it interesting how they closed the first book, because it was about how the mother and the daughter finally kind of interact, and it was just such a weird scene, but it was such a good kind of segue into the second book, because you get to learn a little bit more about Midoriko when she grows up and when she's like now she has a boyfriend and all of that in the second book. So how her journey from these early preteen kind of like really confused, really angry at the world, really angry at the changes with her own body, then goes to become very confident, I would say, girl when she grows up. And then you get to learn in the second book about Natsuko, the main character in the first book, who you don't really get to learn a lot about her in the first book, just how she thinks it's so absurd, the world. But in the second book, it's about a decade later, and she's a published author. She's doing well now. She's paid to constantly write, and she's living her life, right? But she's not happy because she's suddenly come to realize that she wants a baby. And some of the topics that I thought were done so well in the second book is asexuality, and how asexuality is actually very normal, but most people live in denial of it. We have seen that there is a wide spectrum, and people fall in different categories within that. And I'm sure there are categories of sexuality that we haven't even defined. So that's why we have the LGBTQ+, because we're all so different, and as a result, our sexualities are going to be different. But asexuality is not something that I see very well kind of portrayed, or something that people talk about a lot, so I thought that was very well done. She also talks a lot about artificial insemination, and that is the primary kind of theme to the second book, and her understanding of like different people who are children who are born out of artificial insemination, women who've gone through artificial insemination. And if you don't know what that is when you get injected sperm to have a baby. You don't need to like have sex with someone to have a baby. That's what it is. And in countries like America, it's still quite common, but in countries like Japan, it's still quite taboo. And even like the whole idea of a single woman having a baby is quite taboo. So it's like, do you really want to bring a child into this world knowing that they're always going to be different, because they're not going to have a dad, or they might not know who the dad is, depending on how you choose to go through artificial insemination. If you want to know who the dad is, or you want to kind of keep it a secret and you want nothing to do with the man again. And she meets a couple of, it's just, oh my god, like there's so much in there. And the whole idea from like birth to death is so well kind of portrayed through the course of the book. There was one character who also talked about like how childbirth can be really, really cruel, because you're bringing people into this world that is so cruel, and it's kind of forcing them to come into this world while giving them no choice. And in that way, you're kind of being selfish, because you know this life is hard, and still you choose to bring up children into this world where life is going to be hard for them as well. And it's just very like, it's not necessarily the character's train of thought, but just different perspectives that she brings in, like how different people think. It's not necessarily the main kind of thing that she's saying. It's a lot of different perspectives on the whole concept. And she also has this other character who is such an upbeat, like she and her daughter live alone in this house, and she's an author too, and her house is a mess and everything looks like a mess, but she and her daughter are living her life, and that's how she chose to pursue motherhood, and she's quite confident in that way. So this character who thinks of having a baby is now looking at several different women approach motherhood so differently, and is trying to make her own mind about, do I want kids, and if I want kids, what kind of mother am I going to be, what is the right or wrong way. Thing is, there is no right or wrong way, and there is just so much to unpack, and so much, like even at my age, thinking that over the next maybe like 10 years, it's my age to kind of have children, right? If I want children, and if I do want children, like, am I emotionally stable enough to have children? Am I doing well enough economically to have children? Am I in a place where I will be able to give them the emotional support that they need, the monetary support that they need? Overall, just what do I want in my life, and do I even want it? It was a great reminder that there is like, the world is progressing, but we still have a very long way to go in terms of feminist rights and women's voice, and just understanding the problems that women face and the questions that they're faced with every single day. And if we are to live all by ourselves as women, what does that mean for us? And if we are to choose a partner, what do we want in them? If we are to choose to have babies, what kind of relationships are we going to have with our children? And it's just a lot in there that I thought was really, really well done. Before I went into the book, I didn't know anything about the book apart from the fact that it was very Murakami-esque, as I said. Now, coming back to that point, do I really think it's Murakami-esque? I don't think so. I think she has a very distinct style of her own. If anything, Murakami is quite known to have very repulsive descriptions of women that throw people off. Maybe I don't understand where the comparison is coming from, but to me, I saw them as very, very different and very, very good in their own right. And I think she is a really powerful kind of writer in how much and how well she can deal with very intense topics, not make the reader feel uncomfortable, but rather empathize with the characters and actually think, oh my god, I never thought about it, but I felt that way. So in so many ways, I think it's a very important piece of literature that we now have access to, because earlier it was just in Japan, but it has thankfully been translated and we can all read it now. So yeah, that's where I'll leave my review for today. I thought it was such a good book that I wanted to talk about it independently, independent from my kind of monthly book reviews. I'm very excited for another year of discovery when it comes to books and reading new books from new authors, and hopefully I can diversify my reading range a lot more next year. I feel like the light is getting diffused and I'm kind of blurry. But anyways, I'll leave you guys here today. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.